Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings and St. Johns County, Florida, over a century ago. In this podcast, I'll share stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So let's go back in time for some of the top news stories from this week in February 1920. Pelliser is held pending a hearing. Accused of the murder of Levi Ross of Hastings, William Pelliser, also of Hastings, was taken to the county jail in St. Augustine Tuesday afternoon by Marshal Charles E. Green and held without bond, pending a preliminary hearing, which will take place in Hastings Monday morning. Complete details of the affair have not yet been given out by the police, but such facts as are available to indicate the killing grew out of a dispute resulting from a quarrel over shine. It occurred sometime Sunday night, 12 miles south of Hastings on the Dixie Highway, where the two men, with others, had gone to buy shine, it said. Ross was brought back to Hastings in a serious condition early Monday morning, suffering from a bullet wound through the body. He was at once rushed by automobile to a hospital in St. Augustine, where he died Tuesday morning. William Pelliser was arrested in his father's house by Marshal Green on Monday morning and was arraigned before Justice of the Peace H.F. Moore. A complaint was sworn out by S.H. Goodwin, the father-in-law of Ross, in which Pelliser was charged with assault with intent to kill. He was placed under bond for $2,000, which he was able to furnish. When news of the death of Ross was received Tuesday morning, Pelliser was rearrested by Marshal Green, charged with murder, and held without bond. Ross had lived in Hastings for about 15 years. He was a widower with one small son. Pelliser is a veteran of the late war and is well known in this vicinity. Local National Guard unit recently organized and now under full headway. The newly organized Hastings Company of the Florida National Guard is now under full headway. Temporary quarters have been obtained on the second floor of the brick garage, which will be used for the time being as an armory, and the actual work of drilling and routine will be started without delay. The members of the company were notified late last week to appear in the armory on Tuesday evening for state inspection and final formalities occasioned by the organization of the company. Following that detail, the men were given a physical examination by Lieutenant G.A. Clark of Daytona, the Medical Corps of the Florida National Guard. Lieutenant Clark was highly pleased by the appearance of the new company and the condition of its personnel. Following the examination, he stated that he had never before examined a company of recruits showing such a high degree of both mental and physical condition. Third attempt to hold election in town of Hastings, a success. The Hastings city election, after having proved a failure twice because of technicalities, was successfully carried out on Thursday, and the new city government for the coming year was elected. No excitement marked the election, as the ticket was virtually the same as that elected at the special election early in the month. The new government is as follows: Mayor, Dr. B.L. Paget, and Councilman B.F. Massey Jr., B.H. Batchelder, W.G. Waller, E.M. Curtis, W.H. Wildman, and E.E. Durkee. Unpatriotic black man slashes white man. A slashing affray which narrowly escaped having serious results took place in Railroad Square early Saturday night when a strange black man who gave his name as Pearl Sanderson of Gainesville attempted to stab William Pelliser of Hastings. The affair occurred while the boys of the Georgia Industrial Home of Macon were giving a concert in the square. While the Star-Spangled Banner was being played, Sanderson stood with his hat on. He was ordered by those near him to remove his hat and show respect for the national anthem. He responded by cocking his hat on the side of his head and assuming a defiant attitude. The hat was promptly knocked from his head, whereupon he drew an open knife from his pocket and struck out blindly, the knife cutting a long slice on Pelliser's coat just over his heart. Marshal Charles E. Green, who was close at hand, immediately made for Sanderson just as a group of local men started for him from the opposite side. The marshal, with revolver drawn, placed Sanderson under arrest and confiscated his knife, rushing him to the local jail to avoid what for a few moments threatened to be an attempt to take the man away from him, which event would have presumably been unfortunate for the black man. Sanderson was placed under $25 cash bond, which was furnished, and he was allowed to go free. He failed to appear for trial Monday morning, forfeiting bond and making his getaway. On to this week's Talk of the Times, where I give you a glimpse of what people were thinking over 100 years ago. This time I have an editorial from the Hastings Herald in February 1920, It comes during a time when there was a lot of debate over whether Florida needed a fence law, as cattle were known to graze pretty much anywhere they wanted, and while that may have been okay way out in the country, as they were grazing closer to town, it was becoming an issue of contention. The editorial was titled, "Why Not?" and it reads, "By putting up posters on this land forbidding hunting thereon, a man can keep hunters off it. By putting up posters forbidding trespassing, he can keep all persons, hunters or otherwise, off it. But he can cover his trees with posters written in every known language and dialect, and it will have no effect toward keeping somebody else's cows off it. The owner of the cows can neither enter the land nor hunt on it, but his cows can go and come at will. Therefore, it is evidently the intention of the laws of Florida to grant cows greater rights than are given Florida citizens. If you plant a garden or devote several acres of land to the cultivation of crops, and your neighbor enters that land and destroys your crops, you can have him arrested and get satisfaction out of him through the courts. Or if his conduct on your land is especially atrocious, it is conceivable that a jury of your peers might even find your act justified if you should fill him full of buckshot. Should his cow destroy your crops and be filled full of buckshot in return, that same jury would very likely sentence you to a long term in jail. Again, we find that Florida laws are evidently drawn for the protection of the Florida cattle instead of Florida citizens. If you steal your neighbor's automobile from his garage, you are guilty of a minor crime for which you may receive a light imprisonment, but for which you will probably be fined. If you steal his cow or bull while either is roaming over your land, you are guilty of a felony, punishable by imprisonment for a term of years with no alternative of fine. The automobile may be worth $2,000, while the cow or bull may be worth less than many cents. But that fact has no bearing on the case. Florida laws are drawn for the benefit of Florida cattle, and a mere citizen has no right to question them. Florida is about to choose members of the legislature for a session which will probably see the no fence law brought up for consideration. It is therefore our duty to consider this matter carefully. If our status is to have a government by the people and for the people, we should send to the legislature members who will vote for the people's rights. If, on the other hand, we are to continue having a government for the cattle, why not let the cows go to the legislature themselves, while the rest of us stay home and build fences? I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory, when we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to 100 years ago. This week, as we celebrate Black History Month, let's listen to an artist who was breaking through barriers at the time. Music was a means of survival for young Bessie Smith. Her parents died when she was young, leaving her and her 6 brothers and sisters to fend for themselves in the first decade of the 1900s. She and her brother Andrew performed on the streets of Chattanooga, Tennessee, Bessie singing and dancing, while her brother accompanied her on the guitar. By 1923, she had made a name for herself, recording her first songs with Columbia Records. She was seen as rough and often called low class, but at the same time, because she had a voice that everyone wanted to get a ticket to hear, she became more and more popular, eventually becoming the highest paid Black entertainer of her day, even having her own railroad car to travel into shows. Her personal life was not as successful. She was married to a security guard, Jack Gee, but her marriage was strained with infidelities on both sides, hers often being with other women, and her life was cut short when she was critically injured in a car crash in her early 40s and died a day later. Her estranged husband didn't allow a tombstone to be placed on her grave, and it remained unmarked until 1970, when Janis Joplin funded one. But let's remember her in her heyday. Here is the woman who would be called the Empress of Blues. In one of her early recordings with Capitol Records, here's Bessie Smith with Easy Come, Easy Go Blues.
Some folks, they always crying them mean old blues. Not me, was war.